So once again, net neutrality is back in the news. The FCC is currently considering plans to roll back net neutrality rules. First, let's step back and get a bit of an understanding of what net neutrality is. The internet, like anything else, is delivered to your home. And it's delivered by an ISP or Internet Service Provider. Currently, the pipes or the infrastructure that the internet is delivered on is regulated under rules that are called net neutrality, which says that the internet provider cannot distinguish and discriminate based around the type of content you are getting, meaning that whatever speed you pay for, you will get that on both Netflix, Facebook, and some random website. They all come at the same speed. Removing these rules would allow ISPs to set different speeds for different pages, making it so that some load much faster than others. A lot of ISPs like Comcast and Verizon want these net neutrality rules eliminated. And right now it looks like the FCC is going to rule in their favor when it votes on December 14th on a rule change that would eliminate net neutrality. But there's an enormous amount of opposition to this among most Americans. So let's take a look at the pros and cons of net neutrality. So the biggest benefit of net neutrality is it creates a level playing field for websites and applications to compete upon. If ISPs were able to sell these fast lanes, it would largely be large, successful corporations with lots of money, places like Facebook, Google, Netflix, who would be paying for these fast lanes. And smaller startups who might be competing in any of these spaces would likely be unable to afford these fast lanes. And the reality is that it's not just that these companies get a lane that is faster than normal and everyone else is still at a normal speed. They would effectively really be both speeding up these certain websites and slowing down all other sites, making it much harder for a new entrant to compete against a major player. Because even if their service is much better, if it loads a lot slower, you're probably going to use its bigger competitor that has paid for a fast lane, because the speed at which you are able to load has such a huge impact on its value as an internet service. Another big benefit is that it helps keep costs down of online services. Without net neutrality, large ISPs would likely both charge you to access certain content on a fast lane and charge the service for it as well. So if you wanted to access Netflix on a fast lane, you would have to pay an additional fee to your internet service provider. And Netflix would also likely have to pay a large fee in order to get access to these fast lanes. So this adds cost to you, both for paying your internet service provider, but also built into your Netflix subscription, because Netflix would likely pass along that cost to you, either directly or indirectly. And this would happen with all sorts of applications and websites you wanted to use. And again, it's very likely that the non-fast lanes will be significantly slower than what we see today, and may even become unusably slow. In addition to charging people more to access fast lanes, ISPs can also put content they find unfavorable into slow lanes. Most obviously would be content that promotes a return to net neutrality, could be placed into slow lanes, thus suppressing it. But a website that takes any particular religious or political stand could be placed in a slow lane and blocked from buying its way out, making it much harder for people to access this information. And this gives ISPs an enormous amount of power over the news and information people get to consume. And given that so much of our media diet now comes from online sources, ISPs would now have the power to radically change our conversations if they so choose by targeting certain types of content and limiting their speed. Now, the flip side of this last point, which is one of the few cons of net neutrality, is that internet service providers cannot do anything to stop harassment or ISIS propaganda or anything like that under current net neutrality because they're not allowed to block or slow these down. This means that internet service providers cannot help block intimidating or harmful websites or things that Nazis have been using recently, and it essentially gives them safe harbor on the internet. But this is always the trade-off that comes with free speech. An additional purported con of net neutrality is that a lot of internet service providers say they would invest much more heavily in expanding bandwidth capability without net neutrality, and they certainly would be able to get more revenue without net neutrality, and they could use that to invest more heavily in bandwidth development, but it's very unclear whether that would actually happen. I want to also clear up one misconception I've seen thrown around a lot in regards to the net neutrality debate. A lot of people have said that net neutrality has only been around since 2015, which is when the current net neutrality rules were adopted. However, that is not true. Net neutrality has existed in some form in the United States for basically the entirety of the internet. And what happened in 2015 was a reclassification of internet service providers by the FCC. And the reason they did this is because under their previous classification, Verizon had actually sued, essentially in order to get out of these net neutrality rules that existed before 2015, and won. And the only way for the FCC to continue net neutrality was to reclassify them as a Title II. So an actual repeal, which is what the FCC is currently proposing, would not be just going back to 2014. It would be entering a whole new era with no net neutrality, which is something we have not seen in the United States since the net was developed. For me, I, like most people, come down in favor of net neutrality, and it seems very likely from how much money and effort major ISPs are putting into reversing net neutrality rules that they stand to make a lot of money. So at a minimum, they're going to be charging us more, and in a worst case scenario, they will be able to dominate and decide everything we see online in a way they never have been able to before. But that's just my take. Let us know what you think about net neutrality in the comments below, and like and subscribe to learn more.